Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Jenny Halpin, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Midshipman Cara Williams. This evening, we warmly welcome the family of Warrant Officer Thomas Sidney Foy, who are watching the live stream of this ceremony. His story will be told shortly. We warmly welcome Gail and Ian Hayden, representing the 2nd 16th Battalion Association and 1 recruit training unit from Royal Australian Air Force Base in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by a representative on behalf of the family, visitors to the memorial, and students on behalf of Doonside Public School from Doonside, New South Wales. Now, if you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is God by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Students and those who require a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, flowers of the forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Warrant Officer Class 2, Thomas Sidney Foy. Thomas Foy was born on the 15th of October 1901 in Newtown, a village in Lancashire, England. Known by a variety of nicknames, he was the second eldest of 4 children, born to Thomas and Ellen Foy. Little is known of Thomas's childhood. He joined the British Army at some stage after completing his compulsory schooling, seeing over 6 years of service with G Divisional Signals in India. In 1927, Thomas migrated to Western Australia. By 1930, he was employed on the Western Australian Government Railways in their civil engineering branch. Over the next 9 years, he worked across the railway lines in regional Western Australia as a labourer, repairer, pumper, and fettler. In 1933, Thomas married Letitia Letty Williams. Together, the couple had 2 children, Ellen and Jackie. The family eventually settled at 20 Piccadilly Street in Kalgoorlie, though Thomas continued to work on the railways across the region. From early 1939, Thomas was also a member of the local 25th Light Horse. Thomas enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 12th of June 1940. He was allotted to the 2nd 16th Australian Infantry Battalion with the rank of Acting Corporal and marched out to the School of Instruction at Casuala for basic training. After a period of pre-embarkation leave in late September, Acting Corporal Thomas Foy departed Fremantle in HMAT Appy on the 25th of October 1940, bound for the Middle East. After a brief stop at India en route, the 2nd 16th Battalion arrived in Egypt on the 25th of November and moved straight to Palestine to complete their training. In late December, Thomas's rank of corporal was confirmed. The 2nd 16th Battalion's first operational assignment of the war was to help bolster the defences along the Egypt-Libya frontier against an expected German attack. After spending April and May of 1941 occupying positions along the frontier, the battalion returned to Palestine to prepare for its first offensive operation as part of the invasion of Syria and Lebanon. The beginning of campaign in June was characterized by difficult and costly actions against well-entrenched Vichy French troops. The 2nd 16th suffered 264 casualties, the most of any Australian battalions involved. After 2 major battles in early June, Thomas was promoted to acting sergeant. On the 7th of July, following the Battle of Damour, Thomas was wounded in action and evacuated to the 1st Australian General Hospital the next day. He remained in hospital until the end of September, receiving treatment for a shrapnel wound to his left thigh and a gunshot wound to his side. While in hospital, Thomas also reverted to the rank of corporal. Thomas returned to the 2nd 16th Battalion in early October 1941. The battalion had remained on garrison duty in Lebanon following the armistice of the 12th of July and stayed there throughout the rest of the year. During this period, Thomas was promoted twice, first to sergeant in early October and again to acting warrant officer class 2 in mid-October. After attending a training course in late December, Thomas spent February and March of 1942 with the 7th Australian Infantry Training Brigade. He departed the Middle East on the 28th of March 1942 and arrived back in Australia in mid-April. Thomas rejoined the 2nd 16th Battalion at the end of May and spent a brief 2.5 months with the unit in Australia before departing from Brisbane on the 6th of August 1942, bound for New Guinea. The 2nd 16th Battalion arrived at Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea on the 12th of August, and by the end of the month was in action against the Japanese Abori on the Kokoda Trail. Over the next few weeks, they fought a series of desperate actions along the trail as the Japanese pressed forward. Having had their initial effort to capture Port Moresby by a seaborne landing disrupted by the Battle of the Coral Sea, the Japanese saw the Kokoda Trail as a means by which to advance overland from late July 1942. The fighting which developed was some of the most desperate and vicious encountered by Australian troops in the Second World War. Conditions were brutal and over 4,000 Australians fell ill during the fighting. On the 8th of September 1942, the 2nd 16th found themselves encircled by Japanese at Mission Ridge. Thomas Foy was selected as a platoon sergeant of 15 Platoon, and along with Lieutenant William Graydon and 4 other men, they set out to conduct a patrol, hoping to identify the strength and location of the Japanese who flanked their position. The men located a track that had clearly been recently used and followed it towards the crest of a ridge. Lieutenant Graydon reported that, pressed as flat as possible on the sloping rainforest floor, we were mostly concealed. To my right, however, there was a small clear patch, perhaps 2 meters wide. Our platoon sergeant, Tommy Foy, crawled across this clearing. With his head raised, he was looking intently at the ridge, scanning it for any sign of the enemy. I turned to look at Tommy, and as I watched, he was struck in the center of his throat by a bullet fired from 6 meters or less in front of us. Being on a steep slope and having been fired from above, the bullet traveled the full length of his body and killed him instantly. Thomas Foy was 40 years old. Thomas's death came as a shock to the remaining men of the patrol. Graydon recalled that to lose a person of his status so suddenly and so unexpectedly in such circumstances was a bitter blow, especially as we'd approached the lip of the ridge so cautiously. Thomas's body was initially buried in the Afogi area in October 1942. The March of 1943, his remains were exhumed and reburied in Brigade Hill War Cemetery. Over a year later, in May 1944, his remains were once again exhumed and reinterred in Port Moresby's Bamana War Cemetery. After the war, a Commonwealth War Graves headstone was erected over his grave, bearing the personal inscription selected by his grieving family back home. Beloved husband of Letty, devoted father of Ellie and Jacqueline. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Warrant Officer Class 2, Sydney Thomas Foy, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.